spirit of reconciliation, the P&C Federation New South Wales acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout New South Wales and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples.
Welcome to Perspectives and Discussions. Today we are privileged to be joined by Allan of the New South Wales Department of Education and Tessa Keenan of Reconciliation Australia. We'll be discussing how P&Cs and school communities can be active participants this National Reconciliation Week for 2025. So Luke, would you like to begin by introducing yourself and telling us a bit about your role and some of the amazing work that your team have been doing over the last 2 years?
Yeah, so I'm the acting manager for the Reconciliation Action Plan and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander workforce team, and over the past 2 years we've been focused on implementing the department's Innovate Reconciliation Action Plan, and it's been a great journey. There's a lot of really significant pieces of work that exist within the Innovate RAP, and it's very quickly coming to a close at the end of this month. So we'll be looking to understand how we've tracked against the implementation of those initiatives, and looking forward towards our next commitment in relation to the department's reconciliation journey.
Thank you, Luke. Tessa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Gemma, and yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's fantastic to be here. My name is Tessa Keenan. I'm a non-Indigenous person living and working down on Narragunnawali country, just on the south coast of New South Wales. And in saying that, yeah, pay my respects to the elders of these unceded lands, past and present, and those who are emerging. And yeah, I guess thank those elders for their tireless advocacy particularly in the space of education, and we'll talk a little bit about that throughout today. But yeah, my role, I work with Reconciliation Australia, part of the senior executive team there, and general manager of the Narragunnawali Reconciliation and Education Program. And Narragunnawali is a Ngunnawal word that means alive, well-being, coming together and peace. And we're grateful to the United Ngunnawal Elders Council for letting us, or giving us permission to use that word for this national program, because it is, I think the word Narragunnawali really does encapsulate what reconciliation is all about, and particularly in school and early learning service settings, where it's about the well-being of all people within the community, First Nations and non-Indigenous people. We're all living and learning on Aboriginal land or Torres Strait Islander land, wherever we are in this country. So yeah, it's part of the well-being, belonging and coming together, and which is what we'll talk about today. So yeah, it's great to be here, and alongside Luke as well, who we've worked very closely with the New South Wales Department of Education. And so really, I'm also a parent of a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and so kind of very interested and very keen to connect with the parent community and carer community, who play such a critical role in the education space and the education of young people coming through.
Thank you, Tessa. That message is incredibly powerful. Through P&Cs and beyond, we know that parents are active champions of inclusivity in school communities, and the tireless advocacy of Indigenous elders over generations is something that is inspiring and parents can all learn from. With that in mind, I would love you to share a little bit more about the 2025 theme for National Reconciliation Week, Bridging Now to the Next, and maybe talk to us a little bit more about how it reflects the ongoing journey of reconciliation in Australia.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to talk to that. And so, yeah, every year of the 27th of May to the 3rd of June, we celebrate National Reconciliation Week. So it's actually been we've been marking that week within those dates for 30 years. So, and it's a flagship, I guess, event or campaign of Reconciliation Australia. And those 2 dates are really significant, and they mark 2 really significant milestones in our reconciliation journey. So the 27th of May being the anniversary of the successful 1967 referendum, and then the 1992 Mabo, the High Court Mabo decision that kind of overturned returned terra nullius, or that idea of land belonging to no one, and led to the Native Title Act. So every year we reflect on kind of where we're at within the process of reconciliation, noting that, yeah, it really has been only around for one generation. If we talk about if we think of it, a generation is about 30 years, and reconciliation as a formal process. So it was 1991 that it kind of officially started with the Council for Aboriginal Reconciliation, and Reconciliation Australia, the organisation that I work for, kind of kicked off in 2001. So it really is an opportunity to really reflect on where we're at as a nation. And this year's National Reconciliation Week theme, Bridging Now to Next, really reflects on the ongoing connection between the past, present and future of our reconciliation journey. So really calling on us all to step forward together and to build on the legacy of those who have carved the way for us. So similarly, we're talking about the tireless advocacy of elders, many who have carried the load of reconciliation for a long time, First Nations elders and community members, but really reconciliation shouldn't be the responsibility of First Nations people to be leading. So it's around how do we make sure that we're working together, having those meaningful conversations, and acknowledging the importance, the role that we play in the path to truth, justice and equality. So the new National Reconciliation Week theme artwork, so every year we invite a different artist to think about what the theme means to them. And so this year we're privileged to have Kalkadoon woman and artist Bree Buttonshaw do the artwork for this work, and it really for the theme, and she really took it to a whole nother plane, really, in terms of using native plants and the imagery of native plants, which are known for regenerating after fire and really thriving through adversity. And so she took this idea of regeneration and to symbolise our collective strength and the possibilities for renewal, and thinking about where we're at now as a time for growth and reflection and commitment to walking together. So, you know, the road to reconciliation is not smooth and has not been smooth or steady. And, you know, we've made huge strides, but also there's been a lot of setbacks. And, you know, a really big theme or milestone, I guess, in the reconciliation movement that we're celebrating this year is 25 years since Corroboree 2000 and the Walk for Reconciliation across the Harbour Bridge, where we saw over 250,000 people walk for reconciliation, not just in Sydney but right around the country. And it was the biggest political demonstration the country has ever seen. So that idea of, bridging now to next, the bridging is the nod to that anniversary, 25 years. But I guess, since then there's been the apology to the stolen generations, another significant milestone. However, we still are seeing First Nations children being removed at a much higher rate than non-Indigenous children. So again, a milestone, but we're still, there's still a setback. And then obviously the 2023 referendum was a very significant and disappointing detour. And I think the artist is really reflecting on that as, a time where of regeneration and renewal and reflection, but to ensure that we're not deterred and that we are our determination is unstoppable, and that we're continuing for this journey of reconciliation and walking together.
Luke, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, Gemma, for me, it's about, harnessing that legacy that has been left for us from those leaders who have broken down the barriers that have existed for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And, that from a relationships perspective, because I think that's a really critical component of reconciliation moving forward is, that ability to connect and to connect around our shared history and to have an understanding and empathy around the situation that Aboriginal people have been placed in due to colonisation. I've got behind me here on my screen the community of Walhallow, which is on Gomeroi country where I'm from. It's about 65 kilometres southwest of Tamworth on Gomeroi country, where I live and work currently. And one of the things that I saw from my elders in my community is the importance of relationships. And the importance of relationships in establishing trust and to be able to walk together and break down barriers. I am privileged to take advantage of that work that's been done from people in my community that have remained steadfast and in the face of that adversity and continued to champion their people and our rights. And that is a really significant sort of component of improving race relations and that historical acceptance piece of reconciliation. We've all got a role to play on an individual level and also from an organisational level. The power in working together to improve outcomes for Aboriginal people where that equity or that equality hasn't existed in the past. It is an important consideration for all of us in how we might use that sphere of influence that exists and the relationships that we have and how we leverage that to create the change that needs to occur. I think about how this will look for my kids into the future. And, that's something that I remain hopeful about. I feel we've made a lot of progress, albeit there's still a lot of progress to be made. But we need to keep pushing for this change to occur. And, the institutional components of that is a really strong hold that we need to continue to look at opportunities to address that change that needs to occur. And at the foundation of that, I believe I'll go back to it is relationships and understanding.
Luke and Tessa, would you talk to us a little bit about how the theme encourages Australians to connect past lessons with future actions in the context of reconciliation?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that point that I've made about understanding where we've come from and what our shared history is, and the need for that change to occur. The brunt that was felt by Aboriginal people have placed us in a really disadvantaged position, and we need to really pick up the pace in regards to addressing those inequities, so that we continue to improve outcomes for our people into the future. And there's a whole world of actions that can be committed to for people around that, as I'd mentioned before, both personally and professionally. There's a role there to play for everyone, and if that load is shared across our respective communities and organisations, that load becomes lighter. It makes the change that needs to occur easier, and people start to become to be on the same page. I think there's a lot of different perspectives about where we've come from as a nation, and where we need to be. But I think unifying, that direction is an important part of, building the change that needs to occur.
Yeah, and I think just kind of building on that and the question around, learning from past lessons so that, to inform future actions. I think Luke's spoken a bit about the importance of understanding what that history actually is. So to understand the lessons of the past, we need to really actually go back and look at what that past is, and the truth. The truth telling is so important, and particularly within the context of education, and where, you know, historically in this country, the formal education system has served as a tool of colonization, which is, you know, a big and can be quite confronting to think of it in that way, but it is you know, the Parramatta Native Institution was the first institution or formal school set up for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, but can also be considered as the first instances of removal of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children from their families. So, you know, it was, I guess, a system that was introduced to try to assimilate Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children into European or colonial society. And, you know, we know also that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and pedagogies and perspectives have been systematically excluded from and silenced within mainstream educational institutions, policies and frameworks. You know, William Stanner, the anthropologist, you know, used the term the Great Australian Silence, or he also spoke about a cult of forgetfulness on a national scale. You know, and our curriculum plays a huge role in actually teaching us about the true histories, or the history, or how a nation wants to be presented. So, you know, the education system has played a really big role in that. And as a result, many generations, I'm sure people listening on this call have, you know, grown up with an inadequate understanding of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, and very limited awareness of those true histories. And I guess just to draw an example from the New South Wales context that I guess has some relevance to this conversation as well is, you know, in 1902, there was a policy that was introduced called exclusion on demand, where government schools were directed to exclude Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students if complaints were received from non-Indigenous parents. And this in 1925, so only, you know, a couple of decades later, there's an example within Bateman's Bay Public School down on the south coast, hour or so down from where I am, where that school excluded Aboriginal students in response to a petition from the local PNC group. And so because of that policy that was in place, those Aboriginal children were, you know, excluded from the school. But the school principal, interestingly, with local Aboriginal community members, actually wrote a protest letter to the King of England at the time, and eventually that letter went to the Governor General and the Premier of New South Wales and to the New South Wales Department of Education, and actually they overturned that. It was a really successful, you know, piece of advocacy, but they were at that point fighting against policy. And that was the power of, you know, of the PNC. We know that PNC federations and associations do have a lot of influence, but actually it was kind of, that exclusion was something that, you know, was seen to be in line with policy at the time. So we know that, yeah, and that exclusion on demand policy was in place within the Teacher's Handbook in New South Wales until 1972. So that's not that long ago. So I think that understanding that history of the institutions, but also of the policy that did govern education, you know, and exclude Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and families is really important to kind of have an awareness of, because it also gives it insights into the institutions that, you know, are still standing there today, but would be very different places. And, you know, we know how much PNC associations value inclusion, and are actually often the ones that are really pushing for even more inclusion within schools. So, you know, where education has been a tool of colonization in the past, there is a huge opportunity, and we are seeing this shift towards education being a tool for reconciliation. And, you know, there has been huge shifts in the last, you know, decade or so with, you know, the Australian curriculum, the early years learning framework. You know, to be a teacher in this country, you need to be doing the work of reconciliation and teaching about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories, cultures, perspectives, regardless of what subject you're teaching or what year level. So, you know, there's no excuses anymore, and the system is shifting. There's still a long way to go, and parents and carers do play a really significant role in that.
one of the most significant initiatives that is contained within our Innovate RAP is a truth-telling process where the department is looking at its history in delivering education to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people across New South Wales, and the impact that the department's policy and practice has had on Aboriginal people, Aboriginal cultures and educational outcomes. And we've worked with the Puri Global Indigenous History Centre at the University of Newcastle to undertake a piece of research to look at that history. We wanted it to be an independent and objective view of the department's way of working with Aboriginal people from its inception through to a more contemporary sense. And one of the sort of key findings that have come out of that is that history of exclusion of Aboriginal people. I don't think it's a secret that racism is a big part of the experience for Aboriginal people in New South Wales, and our Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters that have relocated here. There's this use of untrained teachers and this history of limited syllabus for Aboriginal schools, which Walhallow was one of those. It was set up as an Aboriginal specific school before the status being changed to a public school. And the use of Aboriginal reserves was a key part of the assimilationist approaches of state governments. And the tool that was a part of that was the schools, as Tessa had mentioned, and that intersection between the department and the Aborigines Protection and Welfare Board is an important relationship to explore and to understand the policy approaches that created these environments where Aboriginal people were exposed to segregation and really draconian approaches to assimilation. And the work of the board really influenced what was happening in schools at that time. And you don't see key changes sort of really start to occur until the 1970s, when the particular needs of Aboriginal students became recognised and continued to be built on throughout the subsequent decades. And that doesn't sit in isolation. It's related to the activism that was happening, the calls for equality and equity from Aboriginal people and communities, demanding better outcomes and for their rights to be recognised. It's the shift. You can almost see it there with the 1967 referendum moving through to the repealing of the Aborigines Protection Act in 1969. And I'm sure there's a lot of other significant dates and changes that happened, but they are really two key undertakings that produced really good outcomes in terms of that change that was required to improve outcomes for Aboriginal people and start to provoke system change, from a policy perspective. And later on, you see the emergence of the specific Aboriginal education policy, which has been pivotal in continuing to address that system change that is needed from mostly a curriculum perspective. But the building of an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander workforce as well, the introduction of Aboriginal education assistants, and you've got the emergence of the first Aboriginal teachers that are coming through universities. Yes, so one of the key things that we've sort of built into the scope of this work is celebrating the strength and resilience of Aboriginal people, despite the adversity that's out there from an institutional racism perspective. It shouldn't be all deficit-based views of our history, but an opportunity to celebrate the the successes that have occurred as well. And I think it'd be remiss of me not to mention that that wasn't just due to Aboriginal people. There are really strong non-Aboriginal allies that have played key roles in that change that's occurred as well.
Just off the back of what Luke was saying, I think in one really unique and important, I guess, element of the history of education and the in New South Wales is the establishment of the New South Wales ACG, and in the 1977, I think it was, the late 70s, off the back of a lot of that advocacy that Luke was talking about. And the New South Wales ACG is still going very strong. It's one of the oldest kind of community organisations across the country, with an incredible structure of a state kind of body with regional but also local representation in local groups. So there is that voice straight to the state, but also the state represents the voice of New South Wales Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander members to government. And so, that advocacy is still ongoing in schools. I'm sure many of the PNCs and members who are on the call are engaged with and have engaged with or might have been part of the local Aboriginal Education Consultative Group. And, New South Wales is, and there's that partnership agreement as well with the Department of Education, to really uphold that commitment of walking together, but very importantly, listening to the ideas and aspirations of First Nations people within those local communities, which are central to informing any reconciliation process. Just wanted to kind of throw that in there too, because it's such an important part of the New South Wales story in particular.
We know that PNC associations work collaboratively, and they're no strangers to the concept that many hands make light work. We know that when they come together behind a shared goal, parents and community can achieve amazing things in schools. So how do we capitalise on the constructive and fruitful discussions that are occurring in schools this National Reconciliation Week?
I think for those that, are getting started, National Reconciliation Week is a really great way to do that. There's lots of events, schools and and early learning services across the country will be engaging and celebrating Reconciliation Week in some way, shape or form. And there might be walks for reconciliation in your local community. So it's, I guess, showing up and just attending, being a listener and a learner, but also actively reflecting on the role that you play. And I guess if but that is 1 week of the year. So, the work of reconciliation doesn't stop and start at Reconciliation Week. So I think in thinking leveraging that week to start a conversation if one hasn't started, ask your school that you're connected with, you're working with, if they have a reconciliation action plan, which is a formal statement of commitment to reconciliation. And Narragunnawali, the program that Reconciliation Australia's education program, has a reconciliation action plan process designed for the unique environments of schools and early learning services, knowing how busy they are and how time poor teachers and educators are. But yeah, asking, jumping on the Who Has a Rap map and looking at and seeing if the school is on there. And if not, it's a great way to start a conversation with the principal, with other teachers, and get involved as well. RAPs they need to have a working group made up of a diverse representation of people within the school community, and parents and carers should absolutely be part of that formal, that Reconciliation Action Plan working group. It's a great opportunity for schools and PNCs to really work together and join forces when it comes to reconciliation, and to identify places where, or areas where PNCs can actually play a really unique role in bringing that particular actions to life. So RAPs are made up of a series of actions that schools commit to for a 12-month period. And there are 14 minimum required actions that every school, we reckon, across the country should be doing, that to say that you can fly the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags, but if that's all a school is doing, that's not a whole school commitment to reconciliation. However, flagpoles cost money, and PNCs are very good at raising money. So, that's a really good example of, thinking about fundraisers for things like, okay, we don't have flagpoles up at our school, so we're going to contact our local member who should give them to you for free, but to raise money for the flagpoles, that might be something that the PNCs kind of work on and take that up as a deliverable that they're going to deliver on through the RAP. So yeah, it's a great time to start the conversation if it hasn't started, and if it has started, then continue it and look at how you can extend yourself within your reconciliation commitments, and really reflecting on in the work that the PNC is doing, like what does reconciliation look like in your meetings, and do you acknowledge country at the start of meetings? Do you have reconciliation built into your agenda or into your plan for the year ahead? Is there budget for reconciliation within the fundraising plan, or even in the things that you're doing? Are there opportunities to bring looking into kind of professional learning or learning opportunities for other parents or people within the PNC and more broadly across the school community to learn about things like the true histories of the area, and because I guess the other thing we often hear from parents and carers getting involved in reconciliation initiatives is the intergenerational learning that happens, and there's so much to learn. So also kind of thinking of yourself as a learner and a listener just as much as a parent and carer and advocate for inclusion and all of that. So yeah, just a few things, but there's a lot as well that that PNCs can do this NRW or National Reconciliation Week, but beyond as well.
We see PNCs doing some fantastic things, bringing Indigenous artwork into schools, commissioning murals, maybe purchasing decals for school walls that have an acknowledgement of country, various things that the PNC feels that they can do within their remit to support the reconciliation journey of a school as a whole. When we're having these discussions as parents on a PNC, what would you suggest to us to make sure that any initiative we undertake is respectful, is meaningful, and is authentic? And where can we go to get more advice or some resources to make sure any decisions the PNC makes are being undertaken with all of the relevant context and history in mind?
I think that's a really good question, and I think it goes back to something Luke said earlier, that it's about relationships. So you might have a really awesome idea for a mural, and that's PNC. I imagine when you put your mind to it, it's like, we're going to deliver on that mural. But in developing the relationships, it actually might not be like with the local community, might not actually be, there might be something else that a different idea or a different approach that might come up. So I think going back to it's great to have the ideas, but I think also the flexibility and the openness to new ideas is really important too, but they need to be underpinned by those relationships that Luke was talking about before. And I love that you brought up raising money too, because it is so important that that First Nations people and initiatives that are brought into the school people are remunerated for their time and efforts, and there's no expectation to do things for free. I think sometimes with Welcome to Countries, there is a cost associated with that. And one of the activities, we've got a bunch of activities on the platform, Narragunnawali platform, which is full of resources, but one of them is around, I guess, looking at budget. What's the kind of the monetary value of it? Like, how much is it going to cost? But what is that? What are you actually kind of getting from that experience? And something like a Welcome to Country, for a school that's never had a Welcome to Country before, it might cost a few $100s to invite an elder in, and it might be a traditional owner, and it might feel like quite a transactional relationship, but that could actually lead to something pretty transformative for the school, which is being Welcome to Country for the first time, where it might be a school that's been operational for 100 years or whatever, but also the relationship that could, and and develop out of that, that initial, if that might be the first time you're connecting with a traditional owner. And yeah, so relationships, and remuneration is super important. But Luke, I don't know if you wanted to, sure you had a lot to add to that, but I think that point, so much of it comes down to relationships, as you said earlier.
Yeah, I agree, Tessa, and usually that dialogue, opening it up, it can become a part of something that's more significant and meaningful. The ideas for action can come through that level of engagement, and I think that provides an opportunity for Aboriginal people in local communities to have courage over what they would like to see as approaches and outcomes in regards to reconciliation. And from that perspective, I think there's nothing that's preventing P&C and parents and guardians of kids across our public system from initiating action around reconciliation. I guess the important thing is creating that space for Aboriginal people to have input and to ensure that that is really central to any approach that you're going to take around any action. One of the things that I'll pick up on the point that Tessa spoke to around remuneration, looking at opportunities to understand things you were purchasing, and identifying Aboriginal-owned businesses is another amazing way that you can contribute to greater outcomes for Aboriginal people and communities. We know that most Aboriginal-owned businesses employ Aboriginal people, and that's another approach to developing economic opportunities for Aboriginal families where they haven't been afforded in the past. In fact, there's been deliberate attempts to prevent that from occurring. That's a part of a point that I made earlier about organisations actually leveraging their reach to improve outcomes. It's a great way to do that. And, I think from the perspective of Aboriginal people, that point that Tessa touched on, even though something might be transactional, is a really strong sentiment beyond, that engagement that occurs for Aboriginal people. The relationship, again, is a key part of that, and vital to improving outcomes across any area. Yeah.
We know that these conversations can be sensitive, and sometimes we hear things like, oh, I'm not Indigenous, therefore do I have any role to play in National Reconciliation Week? Or is there anything I can do to support reconciliation in my school, given that it doesn't affect me personally? What would you suggest to perhaps get people to think differently about Reconciliation Week, or to have these discussions in a meaningful way in their school community?
Yeah, that is something that we often hear, and I think are hearing less of, but it's still something that people often think about, that the work of reconciliation is only relevant or should be led by Aboriginal staff within a school, or where there's Aboriginal students at a school. And reconciliation is about every single member of a school community having that opportunity to learn about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, and engage in reconciliation initiatives, and to contribute to the reconciliation process. Reconciliation is about the relationship between non-Indigenous Australians and First Nations people. So, it really is relevant to, regardless of how many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children or families are enrolled in a school, every single child at that school and staff member should be, and parent and community members should have that opportunity to engage in reconciliation. I think it's a good question as well to also ask, well, why are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families not enrolled in the school? And actually what we do see is that schools that really do make a very clear and public commitment to reconciliation, whether it's through a reconciliation action plan or having the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander flags flying in front of the school, having that visible demonstration of respect, but importantly that actual respect through inclusive policies. Once we see a school committing that whole school commitment to reconciliation, enrolments of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families often increase, or there might actually be families within and students within your school community that haven't felt safe to identify as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. So I think it's really important to jump on that sentiment and really ensure that if that is the sentiment of your PNC, there's a bit of learning and unlearning to probably do, and that's probably one of the most important part of reconciliation, is actually kind of understanding yourself and your own biases and the role that you play and can play in reconciliation. So yeah, learning and that continuous being open to being challenged, being open to being wrong as well, you know, and to relearning and you know, like getting it, like, and you will get it wrong every day. I get stuff wrong all the time. It's about continuing on and learning from those, you know, those learning opportunities and continuing on going.
And that's a key point, Tessa. I think, you know, Aboriginal people are some of the most generous people that you will ever come across. Despite the history of colonisation and assimilation in this country, Aboriginal people continue to show up. They continue to be a part of the solution. They're the ones that are, you know, reaching out and wanting to develop relationships because they can see the benefit in that change for their families and their communities. You know, I think it's even more important if there's a lower number of Aboriginal people or even no Aboriginal people in school communities, that we have a focus on reconciliation, because you don't get that that organic or natural exposure to Aboriginal people where, you know, in other communities where there are higher populations of Aboriginal people, that just occurs. And you know, off the back of that, that understanding and that relationships thrive. And you know, it might be a little bit more work for people where you know, those communities are lower in numbers of Aboriginal people or non-existent. But you know, again, it's even more of a reason to step outside of that zone and you know, and develop those linkages with people. And yeah, from a discrete or a specific local school community perspective, you may not have Aboriginal people that you can engage with right there, but there'll be Aboriginal people around the district or the region, and there's an opportunity to, you know, to initiate relationships there and you know, provide that opportunity for involvement. You know, bring it back in the other way. Like what you know, what can we, what opportunities can we afford you to have input into what we're doing? You know, I think that's a great approach to, you know, and a really nice sentiment as well for people to see that there's an active offering of you know, of that involvement, and you know, it has to come with that self-determination as well. It can't be something that's sort of offered on one end and taken away on the other. But yeah, I really feel it's even more important, especially from a generational perspective, where you know, there's an opportunity to break down stereotypes and debunk myths about Aboriginal people. You know, if we're creating good global citizens with our up and coming generations and having them in a better position to understand the history of our country and the situation that Aboriginal people have been put into, and the issues that stem from that, I think you know, there's no reason as to why we shouldn't be going down that path. Yeah.
I think really importantly as well, where, you know, so the other thing that we often hear is people saying, don't want to be tokenistic, or there's a fear of getting it wrong, or feeling really anxious about, because of that, so Kev Carmody and that said, we only feel what we don't understand, so that and that means doing the work to learn and not expecting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to teach you. I think that's the other thing too, is that obviously that opportunity might come up, but I think where you do feel like you're coming at from a place of not knowing, then there is no excuse. There is so much amazing information that is available. It's about also equipping yourself to discern what information you're accessing, and we've got a resource, and I'll make sure we kind of provide links to these resources on evaluating resources. So is it, is the resource written by Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people? Is it local to your community? How are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people represented? So going to, like an old anthropological textbook is probably not the best starting place. There's a lot of, but going to places even like Indigenous X online, or the Koori Mail, and amazing kind of First Nations media outlets, National Indigenous Television, so NITV, and also just accessing, local resources that are most probably available. So there's the Storylines website that has a lot of community information, and there's the opportunity to connect with schools in there, and that's information, use the term self-determination, that's like everything up there has been approved by community. So really, I think just making sure that I guess you're doing the learning, and a lot of the resources that we have on the platform, the Narragunnawali platform, are coming from that place of curiosity, but also there's not an assumption, I guess a place of learning, and that, learn the general stuff so that you can have the deeper conversation when the time comes. So I think it's doing the preparation work, and the learning, and the self-directed learning yourself. And there's also, the 40 actions that are there are professional learning or learning resources in and of themselves. So all of the, you do need to create a free login, but the P&Cs that you're part of, you could even look at utilising those actions and those resources in the way that you do your work. So even if you might not be able to kind of develop your own wrap, you could, well, firstly, look at how you can be integrated into the school's wrap, or instigate one if the school doesn't have one. But also, in embedding that within the way that the P&C runs, like how, feel free to use any of the resources there. They're all freely available. And really about there's a lot of questions. The platform is full of a lot of questions, because you guys within your communities are the ones that are are doing the hard yards of reconciliation, and really thinking about what it looks like and feels like, and what it is in your communities.
Thank you both, Tessa and Luke, for being here today, for sharing the wealth of knowledge and experience that you have, and for having such a broad and meaningful conversation with us. I sincerely appreciate it. I know parents will appreciate it, and I know that this is just the beginning of a longer discussion between us in our communities and in P&C associations as to how we celebrate National Reconciliation Week, not just this time of year, but in an ongoing basis. Thank you again.